Welcome to Wisdom Words, a quiet space to slow down and think deeply. Here, we explore timeless lessons about life, peace, and purpose, one story at a time. So, take a moment, breathe in, and let's begin. Goodbyes don't always come with tears, hugs, or last words. Sometimes, they arrive quietly. No warning. No conversation. No closure. One day everything feels normal, and the next, a message isn't answered. A familiar voice goes silent. A presence slowly fades away. There are goodbyes that echo like thunder. But the hardest ones are the ones that never make a sound. And today, we are going to talk about those. Because everyone, at some point in life, faces a farewell without words. A friendship that drifts away. A love that slowly disappears. A family bond that becomes distant, or even a version of ourselves that we have to let go of. And sometimes, silence hurts more than any goodbye ever could. The unspoken goodbye. Think of a person you once spoke to every day. Where are they now? Is it your fault? Did you do anything wrong? Should you have said more? Tried harder? Stayed longer? Or maybe no one was to blame. Sometimes life just separates people quietly, like fog slowly clearing from a window. The hardest part is not knowing when the goodbye happened. There was no final conversation, no ending chapter. Just distance. And the feeling that something important slipped away. Sometimes, we keep replaying memories and conversations in our heads, searching for answers that don't exist. But silence can't explain. And truth doesn't always come wrapped in words. A short story, The Last Coffee. There was a man named Daniel who met his best friend every Sunday for coffee. They never missed a week. They didn't need to talk about anything special. Sometimes they just sat in silence, enjoying the comfort of presence. One day, Daniel texted, "See you tomorrow." No reply. He texted again. Still nothing. Days passed. Weeks passed. Months passed. He never heard from his friend again. No fight. No reason. No goodbye. Years later, Daniel said, "Sometimes I still look at the empty chair in the cafe and wonder, was that last coffee our goodbye? And I didn't even know it." Some goodbyes are not a moment. They are a slow fading. A gentle disappearance. A silence that grows so large that it becomes a wall between two hearts. Why silent goodbyes hurt more? Silent goodbyes don't give us closure. They leave questions. And human hearts struggle with unanswered questions. We don't just miss the person. We miss the explanation. We miss the chance to speak. We miss the ending we deserved. It feels like a book with the last chapter missing. Or a movie that ends right before the truth is revealed. But maybe closure is a gift we have to give ourselves. Reflective questions. Think about your life. Is there someone you miss but cannot reach anymore? Do you feel like something ended without ending? Are you holding conversations in your head that will never happen in real life? Are you blaming yourself for something that may not even be your fault? If yes, then you are not alone. So many people battle silent goodbyes every day. And sometimes, healing begins not when answers appear, but when we finally accept that some answers will never come. A lesson from the ocean. Stand at the beach for a moment. Watch the waves. Some waves arrive loudly. They crash with sound and power. Others come quietly. They simply rise and disappear. Without notice. Human relationships are like that too. Some end with noise. Others end with silence. But both are endings. Both are real. Both change us. And maybe the ocean teaches us something important. Not every goodbye needs a final word to be real. Letting go of the questions. We often hold on to pain because we want to understand it. But sometimes the real healing begins when we stop searching for reasons and start accepting the truth. Not everyone will explain why they left. Not everyone will stay to help you heal. Not every goodbye needs to be spoken to be real. And not every chapter is meant to close with a sentence. Another story, ghost message. A woman named Claire kept texting someone she loved, even after they stopped answering. Not because she expected a reply, but because she didn't know how to let go. One night she typed a message. "I know you won't answer, but I just wanted you to know. I hope you're doing well." And for the first time in months, she didn't hit send. She deleted the message, then sat in silence, tears in her eyes. But this time, she wasn't waiting for an answer. That was her goodbye. A goodbye without words, but still a goodbye, given to herself. Sometimes letting go does not require another person. Sometimes letting go is a conversation with your own heart. Reflective statements, use with pause. Maybe the hardest goodbye is not to someone else, but to the version of you that waited for them. Healing begins when waiting ends. Your worth is never measured by someone's silence. Some people leave so that room can open for better ones. What silence really means? Silence doesn't always mean someone stopped caring. Sometimes it means they didn't know how to express it. Sometimes they were battling their own pain. Sometimes life took them elsewhere. But silence also teaches us something powerful. That our peace cannot depend on someone else's presence. And our worth cannot depend on someone else's response. Soft transition to next chapter. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to cope with silent goodbyes. How to heal without closure. How to move forward even when questions remain unanswered. Because healing is not the end of pain. It's the beginning of peace. Take a breath, and whenever you're ready, we'll continue. How to heal without closure. How do you heal a wound that has no clear source? How do you move on from someone who never said goodbye? How do you gain closure when closure never arrived? Silent goodbyes leave us searching. They make us replay the past, rewrite conversations, and think of what we should have said. But healing doesn't always begin with answers. Sometimes it begins with acceptance. Today, we'll explore how to recover from a goodbye that never used words. How to respect the pain without letting it control your life. How to let go, even when your heart still wants to understand. Let's begin. Why we seek closure. Human hearts crave clarity. The mind wants to understand what went wrong. We want reasons, explanations, logic. But emotions don't always follow logic. And life doesn't always follow clean endings. Some people walk away without explanation simply because explaining their feelings is harder than leaving. Sometimes the silence tells us more than words ever could. So maybe healing doesn't start when you get answers. Maybe healing starts when you stop chasing them. Story: The Unfinished Letter. A woman named Sarah spent months writing a letter to someone who left her without a word. Not to send it, just to feel heard. She wrote everything she wished she could say. Everything she felt. Everything she imagined went wrong. When she finally finished, she read it one last time. Then folded it and burned it gently in a bowl. She whispered, "These words belong to my pain, not to my future." That moment wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. It was her closure without waiting for someone else to give it. Key lesson: you can create your own closure. Closure doesn't always arrive from the outside. It's something you create inside. Here are quiet ways to give closure to your own heart. Write the letter you'll never send. Allow yourself to feel the grief without guilt. Stop looking for answers in silence. Remember how much love you deserve, even when others forget. Accept that some people leave quietly not because you mattered less, but because they didn't know how to stay. Healing begins when you realize your peace cannot wait for someone else's apology. The fear of being forgotten. One of the deepest fears after a silent goodbye is this: did I even matter? But think about this. What if their silence has nothing to do with your value? What if it is simply a reflection of their own struggle? What if the relationship ended, but the meaning didn't? People are not our lessons, but they can lead us to them. Short example: the empty frame. A man kept a photo on his desk of someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Not because he hoped they'd return, but because he didn't know how to move forward. One day he removed the picture from the frame, but left the frame standing. When asked why, he said, "I needed space to fill with something new." Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means making space. Reflective questions. Ask yourself gently, are you waiting for someone to explain their silence? Are you holding on to pain because you fear who you'll be without it? If closure never came, what would you need to finally move forward? What if closure is not something you find, but something you choose? Acceptance, the quiet door to healing. Acceptance isn't giving up. Acceptance isn't weakness. Acceptance is simply saying, "This chapter may not have ended the way I wanted, but I am still allowed to turn the page." Letting go doesn't always feel like freedom at first. Sometimes it feels like heartbreak. Sometimes it feels like standing alone. Sometimes it feels like silence. But slowly, that silence becomes space. And space becomes possibility. And possibility becomes peace. Gentle advice for moving forward. Here are soft practices to begin healing from a goodbye without words. Speak kindly to yourself. The voice inside your head should be your friend, not your enemy. Stop rehearsing the past. Replaying what happened won't change what happened. Don't chase people who drift away. If they chose distance, let them have it. Protect your energy. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. Start building a life that gives you peace, even without them. A thought to hold. What if the goodbye didn't happen to you? What if it happened for you? What if their silence was not rejection, but redirection? Sometimes the universe clears space before blessings arrive. Sometimes we lose people we thought were permanent, only to discover our own strength was waiting underneath the pain. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something important. How to grow from silent goodbyes. How to become stronger, wiser, and more peaceful, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. If Chapter 1 was about understanding what silent goodbyes are, and Chapter 2 was about healing, then Chapter 3 will be about transformation. Whenever you're ready, we'll continue. Growing through the silence. There is a moment after pain when something begins to change. Not outside you, but inside. A kind of quiet strength grows where the wounds once were. And slowly, you realize the silence didn't break you. It shaped you. Silent goodbyes are never easy, but they hold a hidden opportunity. To grow. To evolve. To understand yourself more deeply. To build a life where your peace is not dependent on anyone else's presence. This chapter is about that transformation. How to rise, not by ignoring the pain, but by learning from it. Let's take a deep breath and begin. The turning point. At first, silent goodbyes feel like endings. But in time, you may discover they were invitations. Invitations to learn what you truly need. To redefine your worth. To grow beyond where you were left. Pain doesn't always ask for permission before it arrives. But growth doesn't always announce when it begins. Sometimes the turning point is so subtle, you only recognize it later. Story: The Walk Home Alone. There was a young woman named Emily. She used to walk home from work with a friend every evening. They never planned it. It just happened naturally. One day, the friend stopped waiting at the door. No explanation. No final walk. Just absence. At first, Emily felt abandoned. But after a week, she began walking home alone. At first, it felt sad. Then quiet. Then peaceful. Soon, she began noticing things she never saw before. The sound of crickets. The colors of the sky. The rhythm of her footsteps. One evening she said to herself, "Maybe I wasn't left behind. Maybe I was simply given space to find a different path." That walk became her time to think, to reflect, to breathe. She didn't just walk home alone. She walked back to herself. Key lesson: loss can lead to discovery. It's easy to think everything is falling apart. But sometimes, things are quietly falling into place. Silent goodbyes can teach us. Not all presence means support. Not all distance is rejection. Growth often begins where comfort ends. Peace sometimes begins with solitude. Your life does not end when someone walks out of it. Maybe silence isn't empty. Maybe it's full of answers we couldn't hear before. A shift in perspective. Consider this. What if the people who left actually played their role perfectly? What if their chapter in your life ended so that yours could begin? Not everyone is meant to go with you to the next stage of your journey. Some people are stepping stones. Some are signposts. Some are mirrors. And some are lessons. But every single one of them was part of your growth. Realizations that change everything. Here are realizations that often appear after the pain fades. I didn't lose myself. I found myself. I didn't get abandoned. I got redirected. They didn't close the door. They simply helped me find a new one. Silence was not a punishment. It was an invitation. Growth begins when we stop asking why did they leave and start asking, who can I become now? Reflective questions. Ask yourself, what did the silence teach me that words never could? What version of myself is beginning to emerge after this pain? Am I ready to build something new for me, not for them? What strengths have I discovered since the silence began? Take a moment to answer. Not with your mind. With your heart. Story, the artist's canvas. A man once lost someone he loved without warning. No goodbye. No closure. Just distance. Heartbroken, he began painting. Not because he was a painter, but because he didn't know how else to express what he felt. Over time, the canvases filled his room. Not with sadness, but with colors. With life. One day he realized, I didn't paint because I was broken. I painted because something new inside me wanted to live. The silent goodbye didn't destroy him. It woke up the artist inside. Sometimes pain doesn't end with healing. Sometimes it ends with creation. A gentle reminder. Be patient with yourself. Growth takes time. Strength doesn't always appear loudly. Courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes growth is simply choosing to wake up again. To breathe again. To hope again. Sometimes growth is deciding that silence will no longer scare you. Takeaway, your story isn't over. You are more than what left you. You are more than the silence. You are still writing your story. And maybe the most beautiful parts are still unwritten. In the final chapter, we'll talk about closure, yes, closure, in a way you might not expect. We'll craft a message for those you never got to say goodbye to. And we'll shape your pain into peace and your silence into strength. Saying goodbye without words. Silent goodbyes are difficult because they leave us wondering if anything was real. But maybe the truth isn't in what was said, maybe it's in what was felt. The beauty of human connection is that it doesn't need to last forever to matter. A person can walk into your life, leave a quiet mark on your heart, and then disappear. But their existence still meant something. Their chapter still had value. And you can still move forward with love instead of bitterness. This is where healing becomes strength. And where silence becomes closure. Take a breath, and let's begin. A letter to the ones who left quietly. You may never read this, and maybe that's okay. I wanted to say goodbye, but the words never found us. Still, I hope you're well. I hope you found peace. And I hope, in your own way, I helped your journey, just like you helped mine. Thank you for being a part of my life, even if it was shorter than I hoped. Our story may be over, but its lessons are not. And I will carry them with me as I begin the next chapter of my life. Sometimes forgiveness is not for them, but for you. Sometimes goodbye doesn't need closure, just acceptance. You don't need their words to move on. You don't need their apology to find peace. You don't need their presence to rediscover yourself. Because the goodbye already happened. You're just learning how to walk forward without looking back. Key takeaways: closing the chapter. Closure doesn't always arrive. Sometimes you create it. Healing doesn't start with answers. It starts with acceptance. You didn't fail, you grew. Someone's silence does not define your worth. Letting go is not losing. It's choosing peace. Reflective statements. You don't owe anyone a version of you that hurts in silence. Your life is still full of chapters waiting to be written. Letting go doesn't erase the story. It simply makes room for new beginnings. The goodbye already happened, now it's time to return to yourself. Final story: the new sunrise. A boy once asked an old man, "When do I know I've healed?" The old man smiled and said, "When you stop looking at the sunset and start waiting for the sunrise." Pain doesn't mean the end. It can be the start of something gentler, wiser, stronger. And maybe the hardest goodbyes aren't walls. Maybe they're doors. Take a breath. The next sunrise is waiting. Thank you for spending this time here. If today's message touched your heart, consider staying with us. There are more stories, more lessons, and more quiet reminders that you're not alone. Whenever life feels heavy, come back to wisdom words. We'll be waiting.